The only time my gambling would stop would be when I had lost everything. There was no remaining money left to gamble with. There was no one who it was acceptable to borrow from. And that would be the time that I could just about build some leverage on myself to stop. Guys, it's Matt. I am a compulsive gambler in recovery, and I'm your mind and movement mentor here to help you. So I'm going to explain a bit more about my gambling story in this video, and also try and be a little bit solutions focused on what you can do if you are in this place where you are compulsively gambling and you have lost everything. You're at what some, I guess, would call a rock bottom moment in the addiction world, and you don't know what to do. I'm going to give you some advice from experience. So this happened to me several times in cyclical like gambling behavior. I wouldn't stop unless I got to a point where, as I said earlier, no remaining money, no one that would lend me any money who was socially or morally acceptable to borrow from. And I'd be frustrated. I'd usually be really frustrated because the addiction, the parasite of addiction was running me at that point, and I didn't want to stop. It was so in my mind, kind of so violently and so potently, that I just wanted to carry on. And I would often try to find other avenues of additional funds. And then it would just become a point where I felt like there was a little crack in the dam where I could probably, okay, this was it. This is the time to stop. And it was like really tough. It was really tough mentally. I think the most recent time that I stopped, which is up to my current date, which will be, I'll be 9 months off of gambling, a week tomorrow, I think. I was ready to stop. I was really ready to stop because I'd had enough. I was really experiencing a lot of physical symptoms at this point where I hadn't really experienced that before. A lot of panic, a lot of anxiety, a lot of waking up in the middle of the night, heart palpitations. So I really was, I'd had enough of, quitting was not going to feel any worse than the way I was feeling at that time, which is often kind of the trade-off that you do in your mind. You know, it's that they say about the rock bottom moment. You're only going to stop or leverage yourself to make change when the pain of changing is less than the current pain that you're in. But times leading up to that, I would run out of money and it not be a possibility to continue gambling. I might have to confess my behaviour based on being behind with finances or because of someone finding out. And I just, it would, I hate to, it sounds weird saying it out loud, but it would kind of annoy me because I was being so run at that time. And often I would put hypothetical bets on in my mind of, well, if I was still gambling today, I would be betting on this or that, or the football at the weekend. And I'd be so frustrated when what I predicted in my mind, what I was essentially going to hypothetically gamble on, came in. That would really roll me and annoy me to almost like physical outbursts of anger, like punching the sofa and things like that, just in sheer frustration. But you know, it's one of those things that the Jekyll and Hyde of addiction. You know, when you are in it, it is so all-consuming. You're in the fog, in the madness. It's like you're in a complete vacuum, that it's very difficult to visualize and associate with normal life. And this was always one of the hardest things. And this is what I will suggest as the first solution. if you are someone that is struggling or feels like you're in a place where, you know, you've lost everything, where do we go from here? The first thing to accept is that you're going to be, and this doesn't get spoken about enough in my opinion, and I've made other videos on this, you are going to be what's known as an anhedonic headspace for a while. For me, it was always about 3 to 4 weeks. For some people it could be shorter, some people maybe longer, potentially substantially longer. And what that means is you're just not going to derive much pleasure from doing things that aren't gambling. As perverse and as ridiculous as that sounds, you are just not going to. Your brain is so fried from your dopamine receptors of being in the crazy chaos, the frenetic headspace of, you know, the highs and lows of gambling, especially with that, the short form type, quick, instantaneous casino-like gambling, you know, raising the stakes, a decision of the wheel in every 20 seconds, or even if you're into sports, you're still really frying your dopamine receptors to the point where you become very, very desensitized to any form of normal pleasure. Now, I know normal is a bit of a loaded term, but it's some of the things that I really, really love, like cooking fajitas and eating it on a Friday night, taking my dog out on a sunny afternoon, watching films or a Netflix series that me and my girlfriend are really into, literally become almost like an ironic joke. They are so laughable as things that would give you pleasure when you are gambling. And there's an adjustment period there, especially if you come to quite a hard stop of gambling where, I don't know, someone finds out, you lose way more money than you forecasted, and you're suddenly at ground zero with nowhere to go and I've got to stop. Then you will experience this. And it's often not labelled, and it's often not really talked about enough. And I suppose it's the case in most addictions as well. I've never been into drink, you know, drugs, that kind of thing. I should imagine in many ways it's probably just as bad in that world. But that is the first thing that is so difficult but necessary to sit with. The idea of that is taking shape at that time, and that it is a thing that exists and you are experiencing it, and the only thing you can do about it is to wait it out with patience and almost wish the time away if you have to, but like trust that will come back, because it absolutely will, once you settle down, diminish the gambling behavior. But at the time, it feels like it will last forever, and it feels like it's so noisy in your mind and so permanent that you just almost can't imagine carrying on if that is going to be as present and as potent as it is in your mind. If it's going to be like that for a year, forget it. You want nothing to do with planet Earth. But it's not going to be. It's going to be weeks, not months, possibly even days, not weeks, maybe for some people. But that is going to be something that is a real struggle, and it's worth looking at the science of what's going on in the brain. It's worth trying to understand. It doesn't make it any easier at all, but it's worth understanding what is going on in your mind at that time, and trusting and accepting that it won't last forever. That is probably the number one thing that I would say. The second thing to do is to reach out by way of some form of recovery. So that could be, if you don't want to join any of the gambling groups like Gamblers Anonymous online or in person or things like that, at least tell someone that you are really struggling with it, and to the extent in which you are struggling, and be honest. And what you'll probably find is two things. One, it's actually quite surprisingly therapeutic to do, because you've been in your head for so long, firefighting your own mind, being very, well in my case anyway, incredibly dishonest with people about why you want to borrow money or debts or what you've been up to or where you've been when you haven't really been there, that it is really quite liberating and quite therapeutic to be honest when you haven't been for a while. And even if it's an alliance, an acquaintance, a best friend, family member, by telling a bit of a warts and all story, you'll find that that is one, very, very therapeutic for you. And number two, you'll probably find that the said person is going to be more helpful, number one, and two, probably less judgmental than you thought in your mind. Because in my experience, the addiction wants to keep you isolated. And the idea of asking for help or any kind of pattern interrupt and coming outside of that was almost like never an option. It would almost have me believe that even people I knew loved me and really cared about me would be real big ogres that were going to turn really nasty immediately if I was honest about it. And that just makes almost like a bigger wall and a bigger barrier for you to be able to be honest, and therefore you don't do it. But when you do it, contrasted to how you thought it was going to be in your mind, say probably not in all cases, but certainly for the most part in my experience, you will be pleasantly surprised that they are a bit more sympathetic, a bit more helpful, and that can really, really help, because you do need some allies. If the person is a problem gambler as well, generally that's even better, which is why I really rate the support groups, GA Online, that kind of thing, because it's only really other addicts, gambling addicts, that will truly get it and understand, and there's a real kind of camaraderie in that. Then I would say the next thing to do is to try and be proactive about your recovery again in a different way. So try and put a bit of a streak together, try to focus on a week without gambling, a month without gambling, almost try to gamify it in a way that gives you a bit of momentum and a bit of traction. Because ultimately, if you were like me when you stopped, as much as there was still some initial cravings, I wanted to keep the streak going. I wanted to keep it, I didn't want to default back to nil, a new clean date, when I'd worked hard, especially when I knew and I was focused on the hard work I'd done in that anhidonic period of coming away from a lot of that hardship. I didn't want to have to go back to all that again, and that was kind of almost like a leverage to keep me going. And there's a big difference, I've said several times on this channel, between abstaining from gambling and being in recovery. And abstaining from gambling is one thing, but being in a proactive recovery is a real different story. That's where you are kind of working on yourself, in developing yourself a bit better. You're doing things that are working on the growth of your character, building up your skill set of life, your passions, things like that, and you're working hard to become a better person. Work on, I suppose, what they would say in the Gamblers Anonymous community, of kind of ironing out your character defects. And that takes peer group support, that takes a constant level of proactivity and commitment to attending things like meetings, making time for that, carving out the time when you're busy, and valuing that as something that's really going to help your recovery. So these are just a few things that you might want to consider. Another mindset that I always had was, I will recover from this. As hard as this is now, this is not forever. I, in my core, know I'm a good person that wants to get better from this cunning, baffling and powerful disease and addiction, and wants, and I can visualize myself having fun in other non-gambling ways, working on my fitness, my passions, that kind of things that I really know are aligned with my core values and my core essence and soul, I suppose, if you will, as opposed to just getting caught up in this cheap dopamine cycle that I've been in. I've been temporarily hijacked by the wrong paradigms, by the wrong kind of stimulus responses, and that is something that won't last forever. That's something that I can get better at and can evolve out of. So I hope this finds you in a bit of comfort, this video, if you are someone that's really struggling with gambling addiction. I always say I make these videos for a younger version of myself, for abstract content on addiction that maybe would have been very helpful to me when I was right in the madness. Would I have listened? I don't know, but it would have been great for it to have been there regardless. So if you know anyone that's struggling with problem gambling or interested in these kind of topics, please feel free to share this video with them. Comment below with your experience. I respond to all the comments, and if you enjoy the video, please like and subscribe. It helps me reach more people about a topic that I am incredibly passionate about. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video very soon. Take care.